What's going on, everybody? Here we are on another Wednesday, and this is my vacation week. So, how do I spend a vacation? Well, I posted an extra video on Tuesday yesterday. Check that out if you haven't. I really found the data that I pulled interesting when comparing PSA and SGC values. But, you know, I've done a few things. I went out and played a few holes of golf with my daughter, Molly. Molly is my older daughter. You guys have heard me talk about Lucy and her soccer. Molly is my college student daughter who's also off this week, so we got to play some golf. So that was a lot of fun. And I've just done a little bit of this, a little bit of that, some yard work and stuff. Anyways, so one of the things that I decided to do this week, because I have a little bit extra time, is instead of doing my normal 5 questions for the week, I'm doing 6. I was going through and I couldn't decide. I was like, which one am I going to not do? I go, hey, you know what? I'm off. Let's do both. So I've got 6 great questions for you this week. Really excited for those. Remember, if you ever have a question that you'd like me to talk about my opinion on, my 2 cents for whatever those are worth, then go ahead and in the comments below, just simply type out your question, and I'd be happy to feature it on an upcoming video. It is a compliment to me. Whenever anybody asks a question, it's like the fact that somebody would be interested in my opinion on anything to do with this hobby is seriously a compliment. So don't hesitate if you've got a question, and I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. But let's take a look at our first of our 6 questions right here. You've shared that your Grail card that you hoped to someday purchase was the 1954 Topps Ernie Banks Rookie Card. How did that particular card get to be at the top of your list? Please share the stories of how many times you nearly made the buy. What specifications are you looking for to make the purchase? Also, is this a card on your radar for the upcoming National? Oh man, why do I love the Ernie Banks Rookie Card? Oh man, there's so many places I could go with this. Well, for one, I can tell you that a lot of my experiences early on in my youth with Ernie Banks were always positive. I remember several times as a kid, because, remember, all the Cubs games were on TV. What was it, WGN? And so they were always on. So as a kid, I watched a lot of those games. I'd come home from school and I'd watch them and really enjoyed, checking out Cubs games. And I remember one time in particular, there was a day and Ernie Banks was at the ballpark. And so the camera was kind of throughout the game. They kept cutting over, and Ernie Banks was just taking pictures with people and signing autographs for people. And he was just smiling and happy, and he's got such a great smile. And I remember that, and it made me really like him. And then, as a kid, another thing that I did a lot of is, remember ESPN Classic? I don't even know if they have ESPN Classic anymore, but they had ESPN Classic, and one of the things they used to show a lot of was that old home run derby show, right? Where it'd have 2 major leaguers, and the 2 major leaguers would do a home run hitting contest, like 9 innings.
From the wonderful world of sports, we bring you Home Run Derby, where each week the leading home run hitters of the major leagues will compete in a home run hitting contest. You'll meet such stars as Duke Snider, Eddie Matthews, Rocky Colavito, Ernie Banks, Mickey Mantle, Henry Aaron, Harmon Killebrew, Willie Mays, and many others.
And I remember seeing Ernie Banks on there and just thinking, man, this guy seems like a good guy. So that always made me fond of him. And then I'm kind of a photo person. I really love photography and I love images. And I just, when you look at that particular card, a lot of the cards that are some of my favorite looking cards are tight shots of the player where you can really see them. You know, the 58 Topps Hank Aaron, for example, the 33 Gaudy Mel Ott, the 58 Whitey Ford, like some really, the 57 Don Drysdale. Like, those are some of my favorite cards. And here you have this likable guy, this all-time great player, and it's a beautiful picture, and it just pops off of that kind of, you know, light. I wouldn't call it a tan. I don't know what you'd call that color. Bone color, maybe. He just pops off there, and you got the blue, you got the old Cubs logo up there, you got the blue on his hat, you got the red. It's just a beautiful image. And another thing I've talked a lot about is how much I love cards that show the player's youth. You know, the 48 Bowman Stan Musial. He looks so young. I love that about that card. And the Ernie Banks, the 54 Ernie Banks, he just looks like a kid. You know, the 54 Al Kaline is like that as well. So there's just, I love Ernie Banks, the guy, the person, you know, and I love the picture of it, the image of it. I love that set, that year. And, you know, I've never really I shared the time at Burbank Sports Cards where I almost bought it, then didn't, then went to buy it and it was sold and that whole thing. But, you know, it's not a card because it's always been fairly expensive. It's always been a card. By the way, I have to throw out there, the 57 Topps Brooks Robinson is another one too. Okay. So, but to me, I've never been that close because it's always been a fairly expensive card. So it's not like I've been about to buy it a bunch of times. And I'll be honest with you, it doesn't need to be sharp. It doesn't need to be a sharp card. I'm okay if it's got rounded corners. What do I want in the one that I'm looking for? I want it to be centered. And I want the image to be clear. I want it to be a bright image of his face. I saw one the other day, to be honest with you, that was a 2, and I thought about buying it. It was on eBay, and it was beautiful. It was centered, and it was a clear image, and I legitimately thought about it. It doesn't have to be a 6. It doesn't have to be a 7 or a 5. It just has to kind of, I have to see it, and it just has to suit my eye. So I don't know any other way to put it. Now, will I target it at the National? I don't want to go in the National with any specific targets. I have a lot of cards that I'd like to have. And if I target a card, I feel like I'm going to force it. I feel like I'm going to force a card even if it's not the right one. So there are, you know, probably 40 or 50 cards that are at the top of my list. I know that's a lot. If I see one that suits my eye, I'm going to buy it. But another thing about the National, and I am going this year, and I'm bringing my dad with me, one of the things that I'll say is, you know, if I go back 2 years, I really wanted to go to the National last year and the year before because of the cards. I wanted to be around all the cards. I wanted to see all the cards. I wanted to have all those cards to choose from. But I'm in such a different place right now. To be totally honest with you, I'm by far most excited to go to the National because I want to spend some time with some of the friends that I've made. So yeah, I'll look at cards and we'll spend time looking over cards, and I'll bring some money to buy some cards, and I probably will buy some cards. But I have no doubt in my mind that I could leave this year's National and feel like it was a complete success and not even buy a card. I've got a handful of people in particular that I'm really, really looking forward to spending some time with. And that is, without question, my biggest goal and my biggest target for the National. But when you look at that Ernie Banks Rookie Card, I don't know how anybody could not think it's anything but gorgeous and a really great, likable guy. And there's nothing more that I enjoy than good people and beautiful imagery. Greg, what are some of your hobby pet peeves since coming back to the hobby? I know for some, if not many collectors, probably, for example, wishing they could go back to 2014 prices. Bonus points for every unpopular opinion, pet peeve, rewarded to you. Thanks, Greg. So, just like every week, I've mentioned this before, and people go, how do you remember all the things that you're going to say? And the way I remember the things I'm going to say is I don't make notes. The only thing I write down is I put the questions down. I don't make any notes about what I'm going to say. I just talk. And the reason I just talk is because it's important to me to be authentic. So I don't have a list of notes. I don't have a list of talking points. I just react. And when I read this question, there's a few things that come into my head. Now, the first thing that I think about when I'm thinking about pet peeves is, first off, a pet peeve I think of as something that makes me mad or makes me upset. And I don't really think there's anything that upsets me, but there are some things that I think kind of are a little bit annoying. The other thing I'll say, though, is the question talks about when I got back into the hobby. I don't feel like I ever left the hobby. I've always looked at my cards. I've always checked cards online, checked prices online, window shopped online. But I wasn't heavily buying and collecting like I am now. But I mean, I don't think there's ever been a year of my life that I haven't bought cards. I went through a stretch for a while where I was buying a lot of the 81 Donruss golf cards. I went through some stretches for a few years where I was buying a lot of ticket stubs. I bought a few of my old Grail cards, like an 86 Donruss Jose Canseco. So I don't think I was ever out of the hobby, but I wasn't in as much as I am now. As far as pet peeves, well, I would say things that I get a little bit annoyed by. I'm really kind of annoyed by the amount of reprints of cards that are out there. If I go and I type in right now T206 and search in eBay, I'm going to have more modern cards show up than cards from 1909, 1910. And that's crazy. Now, I'm all for, kind of reintroducing some of the themes of older cards and sharing that stuff. But when I type in Allen and Ginter, I don't get hardly any cards from 1887, 1888. They're almost all brand new cards. I find that fairly annoying. And there's not really a filter that can get rid of the reprints. So that's a little annoying. Another thing that I find a little bit annoying, and I wouldn't even say it's annoying, but I don't really understand, is it does feel like some people are mildly resentful of the people in the hobby who used to be in the hobby and have re-entered the hobby. It's almost like, oh, you just got back in during COVID, so you don't count. You aren't as important or as valuable or as well respected as somebody who has collected the whole time. And I don't really get that. It's like, I've mentioned a couple of times, I think, that, we're members of a golf country club. And when I go over to the clubhouse sometimes, there are certain people in certain age groups that don't seem super accommodating to my existence and me being there. And I don't really get that. It's like, wait a second. We both like golf. We both like to golf at this course. Why would you be annoyed that I'm here? And it does feel sometimes, and not necessarily towards me, but sometimes towards others, that the people that have been in the hobby for several years, they seem a little bit put off by people that are excited to be re-entering the hobby. And I actually think it should be the opposite. I think we should be reaching out to people to re-enter the hobby. I think we should be helping, extend olive branches to people that to re-enter or be in the hobby. If it's for the first time or the second time or re-entering from their youth, like, why does it seem like you've got this club and you're annoyed that other people want to be affiliated with it? Like, shouldn't we be celebrating the fact that other people share this common joy? Now, I'm not saying a lot of people are that way, but there are some. And it doesn't anger me. It doesn't make me mad, but it kind of baffles me. Like, why aren't we all, and I mentioned this on my channel. I said, hey, I threw out this a few months ago. I said, take a sports card and go give that sports card to somebody. Give somebody a gift of a card. I talked about how, I give my brother a card, some Yankee card for his brother in Christmas, or for his birthday and Christmas every year. I've given gifts to other friends and it's gotten them back into the hobby. Like, go give the gift of a card to somebody and it might reignite the passion that they have for it. And the example that I used when I talked about it was my buddy Darren from Return to Collecting. And, he has returned back into the hobby. And the thing that reignited that fire is when a few years ago, his parents gave him a Nolan Ryan rookie card. And they gave him that card, and now he's absolutely thrilled to be back involved. Why wouldn't we want more people to be involved? It's good for all of us. So that's a little bit of a strange one. But reprints, recycling some of those names, making it hard to filter things, I find a little annoying. And then the people who don't seem that interested for people to either be new or to re-enter, I don't get that. I have a question about the rarity of Jackie Robinson cards. Why is the 1953 Topps Jackie Robinson so much more expensive than his 1954? Is it based on the pop count? Every big Whatnot streamer has a 1954 Jackie Robinson card as their Grail card that they are running at the end of the night. Is the 1954 Jackie Robinson card a bad investment due to its lack of rarity? So that's an interesting question. I don't think that there is a Jackie Robinson card that you can go wrong with. I think they're all great cards. Is Jackie Robinson one of the most important historical figures and players? And for many, many reasons I've mentioned many, many times, I think that collecting Jackie Robinson cards is a fairly smart decision. Now, as far as the two cards that you're talking about in particular, I do agree that it seems like more 54 Jackie Robinsons come up than 53. So I did look up the pop reports. And there are definitely a lot more of the 54 Jackie Robinson than the 53. So is that the reason for the price? Is that the reason that they're out there more? Is that the reason that the 53 sells for so much more? Possibly. I think that the 53 set is a very popular set, but the 54 is as well. for me personally, just my personal opinion is when I like both cards, but when you look at the two cards, I feel like the better looking card is the 53. I feel like the yellow in the background, for whatever reason, does not it does not accentuate the look of a Jackie. Plus, he's kind of looking up in the 54, whereas he's looking more at you in the 53. So for me personally, I think the 53 is a little bit more desirable of a card. Not that you can go wrong with either. I'd love to have both of them. I hope to have both of them someday. But I think the 53 is a little bit better looking. The 53 is a little bit rarer. The 53 is obviously older. I think if you take all of those things and you kind of put them together, I think that that's probably the reason for the price difference. The other thing about the 54s is I feel like a lot of the 54s, because this card, both these cards are in my saved eBay searches. I'm always looking at them and checking to see if there's one that would fit my collection. The 54s, I feel like, have a lot of centering issues that year. Not that 53 is great centering, but 54 is especially bad, not just side to side, but also top to bottom. The other thing about the 54s, I feel like a lot of those that I see have diamond cuts. They're kind of cut slightly diagonally. So I think that because of that, a lot of them that are decent copies of the card, they maybe have a little bit lower eye appeal for some, because some people might not want the off center or not want the diamond cut. And so it might kind of water down the price a little bit. That's possible. I don't really know. My opinion is if you're looking for a player from the 1950s to collect, I think Jackie Robinson is as good of a choice as any. Obviously Mantle, obviously Mays, obviously Aaron, but Jackie to me is as high on the list as there is. So, you know, the part of the question about is it a bad investment or a bad idea or not a good investment or something, I don't think that you have to worry about a Jackie Robinson card being a bad purchase. I just don't think there's such thing as a bad Jackie Robinson purchase. I recently bought a collection all raw cards, 1966 to 1980. Nolan Ryan Rookie Card in 69, 66 to 69 Mantle, Mays, Aaron, Clemente, a few duplicates, Bench second year, 2 1967 Brooks Robinson high numbers, etc. Plus, there are many more example 7 Bench 1975s I've identified, 175 to 200 that are definitely grade-worthy. I lean towards or prefer SGC, but now what? I've placed a big cards in the safe deposit box for now. What is your opinion on this matter? Wait for the dust to settle with the PSA SGC clarification and path forward before submitting? Also, I plan to keep most, trade some, and sell the rest. A good dilemma to have, but thinking through it. So this sounds like quite a collection that you bought. I mean, to have those years and those cards, I mean, I can't even imagine what that must have cost. Obviously, a lot of great cards, some of which you mentioned in here, included in those years. So again, it is a very common question. I mean, because and I think anytime there's a common question, it means there's not really a right or wrong answer. If there was a clear right or wrong answer, it wouldn't be something that people talk about or discuss, because we would all eventually go toward the right answer. And I don't think in this question there is a right answer. I just put out a video on yesterday, that was talking about the topic of PSA values versus SGC values. And PSA does still hold a lead. I mean, of the 24 cards and grades that I looked at in that particular example, I think PSA was had a higher average sale price in 23 of the 24. So PSA clearly is still holding the lead as far as values go. But at the same time, the other thing that was interesting is in quite a few of the examples, things were trending more towards SGC than PSA, meaning the sales at the end of the last 365 days, the most recent sales, it's closer for SGC than it was a year ago. That kind of leads me to believe that more and more people are opening their opinions and their collections to SGC and are willing to pay up closer to the levels that they were for PSA. So does that mean that it doesn't matter? At the end of the day, I continue to say, and I will continue to say, it really boils down to personal preference. If you do not like the PSA brand, if you do not like the PSA holder, if you do not like the way PSA grades, if you don't want to pay the extra money, I mean, when you're talking about as many cards that you're referring to here, so let's just say that you're getting in at PSA for $25 a card. Let's even say $20 a card, right? And SGC is $15 a card. If you're talking about grading a couple of hundred cards, we're looking at an extra $1,000 just in grading fees. Now, if spending the extra $1,000 makes the value of the cards go up by a lot more than the $1,000, then it might make sense. But if you don't really care, if there isn't really a preference between the two companies, well, you know right off the bat you'd save $1,000 if you sent them into SGC. You know, you could also make the argument, which isn't mentioned, about keeping them ungraded. I mean, why do we need them graded? You know, again, I've mentioned before, the reason I grade most of the cards that I send in for grading is because I'm looking to sell them. And when I sell them, it's easier to sell, and I usually get more for them when I sell them graded than ungraded, especially if you're doing it online. In person, sometimes you can do okay if you're selling ungraded cards, but online, it's just really tough to evaluate a 3D object with a 2D picture. So people just aren't willing to pay up quite as much for an ungraded card. So, you know, when you did the follow-up message that talks about, well, you know, you're probably going to keep most of them, but you're going to sell some of them, that is really where I then say, well, I think personal preference is probably the best way to go about that particular answer, because it sounds like a lot of them are going to be in your personal collection. So if you really like the looks of a PSA holder better than an SGC holder, then that's the way you should go, or vice versa. If I don't think, for me personally, the recent acquisition of SGC from the parent company of PSA would drive me, this is just my opinion, away from SGC. I think it's too soon to know what's going to happen. There's a very good chance that it could help SGC card values as much as it could hurt SGC card values. I don't think we know. I also don't think it's going to be an instantaneous thing. I think it's going to be a slow process before we kind of start to hash out where do things actually stand after the acquisition. So I don't think I would let that recent acquisition play into this this decision. Now, if you're just really unsure and you're just saying, I need guidance, I think the safest decision is PSA, because I don't see the PSA brand going away, and I don't see the PSA holder changing. I think SGC could change their holder as a result of the acquisition. I think SGC could eventually fold into PSA, but I don't see the PSA brand ever going away. I don't see the holder making a major change. So that's probably the safest decision, is to do PSA, but that doesn't mean it's the right decision. Again, if it's your personal collection, you just want them authenticated, you want them protected, and then you want them graded for when you sell down the road, I think either company would be fine. And I don't think any recent news would dramatically change that opinion. Question. I'm pretty OCD and currently collecting about 10 to 15 specific players. One of the players I collect is Willie Mays, And the two only main cards I need of his is the 1951 Bowman and the 1952 Topps. How do I proceed if I truly will never be able to afford either? All right, so I certainly understand your situation. I mean, I don't expect to have the money for a 51 Bowman Willie Mays or a 52 Topps Willie Mays anytime soon either. I think maybe let's just look at it from a slightly different perspective, right? If you look at, let's say you really like T206s, and I'll just use that example because it's one that a lot of us can easily visualize the set in the cards. If you really like the T206s, would you not collect the set? If you're a set builder, and you say, yeah, I really like T206s, but I'm not going to collect the set because I'm never going to be able to complete it. Because I'm never going to get the Honus Wagner. I'm never going to get the Eddie Plank. I don't know if it would mean you shouldn't collect any T206s because you can't finish the run. Because those two cards are basically going to be impossible for almost everybody to own. I don't think that should mean that you should just stay away. I think that just means that you'd collect everything but that. So it sounds like there are a lot of players that you collect. And if there are a lot of players that you collect, you could take your funds to focus on some of those other players instead of finishing the Willie Mays run. Because it could take years in budget funds to save up for those cards. Now, you're saying that, you really are kind of OCD and you want to kind of finish things. And well, then you go, okay, well, are there other cards that aren't as important to you as the Mays cards? I mean, if one of the other runs that you have is, Stan Musial or Ernie Banks or Hank Aaron, and it's more important to you to complete the Willie Mays run, then sell off the Ernie Banks run to go buy, one of the cards for the Willie Mays run. I mean, it's all about where we're spending our money. I mean, for me, whenever I go on eBay or go to a card show, I see a lot of stuff that I like. It's just a question of where am I going to spend my money? So if I am saying I've got 12 runs, oh man, I'm never going to finish this run. Well, maybe you should sell a couple of your other runs that don't mean as much to you to finish this run. If it's going to bug you that it's never finished, then finish it with some of the other funds that you have, resources in other runs. And then once you finish that Willie Mays run, then you can go back to the other run. So if one of your runs is a Brooks Robinson run and you have, a couple $1,000 or $4,000 or I don't know the levels of what we're talking about here in the grades and stuff. But if there are other resources that you have, other cards, and they're not being used where you'd prefer them to be used, well then switch it. It's not like they're going to run out of Ernie Banks cards or Hank Aaron cards or, whatever player it is that you decide to sell the run to pay for these cards. You're just transferring those resources into this resource, and now you can go start to reacquire this other resource. So if you really, really, really want to finish the Willie Mays run, and you really, really want those two cards, then I would say sell off some of your other assets to buy those cards, and then restart the other runs that are a little bit more affordable. Question for next week. This is the hobby's version of, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? If you never sell or trade a card, is that card worthless? This was asked to me by someone, and I thought it was a great question, and they make a point. I have to agree with them. So this is definitely an interesting question, and I do understand the tree fall in the forest. If it doesn't make a sound, then did it really make a sound? If nobody hears it to make a sound. I'll tell you this, if a tree falls in the forest, it does make a sound. There just might not be anybody there to hear it, but it 100% made a sound. It maybe just wasn't heard. Now, to your specific question, if you're not going to sell the card, if you're never going to sell the card, does it even have any value? Is it worthless? I would say absolutely not. It is absolutely not worthless just because you're not going to sell it. There's a few reasons for that. Almost every valuable resource on the planet is just temporarily held by someone. You temporarily hold these cards. If you're never going to sell them, that doesn't mean they're never going to be sold. It means you're never going to sell them. You're going to keep them. But unfortunately, you have an expiration date. And when you expire, that means that those assets will be someone else's. And those assets that somebody else has then have value. So if I have 10 bricks of gold under my bed, I would not say that they're not valuable just because I'm not going to sell them. Because someday somebody's going to acquire those bricks of gold, and then they will exchange them for money. Now, it may not be my kids, it may not be my grandkids, it might be my great-grandkids, but eventually they will be exchanged for money. So they have value even if I'm not going to sell them. But having a valuable card, it does more than just for enjoyment. So for example, if you've got, let's just say, a 52 mantle in a 2, and it's a $60,000 card, and you say, it doesn't matter, it has no value because I'm never selling it. I'm never selling this $60,000 card. Here's why it still has value. It still has value to you, even if you're not going to sell it. And here's why. You know in the back of your mind that even if something crazy happened, financial meltdown, identity theft happens, all of your money is drained, you can't pay your bills. You, in the back of your mind, know that you have this asset that could be liquidated. It's almost like an insurance policy. Like, I have life insurance. I'm not planning on using it. I'm not planning on using my life insurance policy. Does that mean I shouldn't have it because I'm not going to benefit from it? No. I should still have life insurance for a couple of reasons. It does provide utility to me, even though my life insurance is never going to give me a single dollar. It's only going to cost me dollars. What it does is it gives me a certain amount of peace of mind to know that should something happen, something catastrophic were to happen, that is there. Just like my house, okay? I'm not planning on selling my house. Does that mean my house is worthless? No. I own my house outright. I don't owe the bank a dime. I have the deed to the house. It is mine. I own it 100% free and clear. Does that mean that it's worthless though because I'm not going to sell it? No. Because I know that if something crazy happened, if I were to lose my job tomorrow, my wife were to lose her job tomorrow, and we had no money, I have an asset that could be exchanged for money. Will it be exchanged for money? No, because I'm not going to sell it. But could I? Yes. And that peace of mind, whether I admit it to myself or not, because I know I'm not going to sell it, it provides a certain utility for you that is peace of mind, that knows that no matter what happens, you always have this asset that could be exchanged for funds, even though it won't be exchanged for funds. So that's kind of my take. It's sort of like my life insurance policy for me. It is not something I'm going to ever benefit from other than peace of mind. And if you have an expensive card or an expensive collection, I think that it does provide a certain amount of peace of mind. That's my take. Those are my takes on 6 questions this week. Great questions, by the way. And I look forward to hearing what all of you want to hear about next week. So again, as always, If you're interested in my opinion, not the right answer, maybe the wrong answer, just simply type your question in the comments below, and I look forward to hearing what you all are interested in.